call a meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. for Orange Planning Commission. Please stand. Pledge of allegiance followed by a silent invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Please call the roll.
Here.
John Junko.
Here.
Maria Mills-Bennett.
Here.
Bo Bozeman.
Here.
Mike Arminio.
Here.
Thomas Jordan.
Here.
And Newton White.
Here. Consideration of the minutes from July 26th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
One correction. On pages 2, 3, and 4, the date is March 22nd. 2018.
Okay. Did the clerk get that? At another point, there is also a Chairman White and a Chairman Green. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Would somebody amend the motion?
I'll amend the motion with the corrections.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Case number 18-900000004. Variance for 4068 Carlisle Drive. It was continued from July 26th meeting. It's a request by the applicant for variances from the Land Development Code to allow only one point of access for a subdivision, reduce the minimum right-of-way width, provide a sidewalk on one side of the right-of-way, reduce the minimum required lot area, reduce the rear building setback, reduce the minimum open space per lot, and increase maximum building coverage per lot. If the variances are approved, the property owner plans to change the Bella Oaks townhome development from a multi-family site development to a residential subdivision with individual townhome lots.
Pull up a chair, Penelope.
Mr. Chairman, let me
What he said.
go on the record that I have a conflict on this, as I am an employee of Paytas Homes, who is part of the applicant in this case.
You said there was a roll call?
Yes, there was a roll call.
I was sleeping.
Well, Commissioner Green is asking about his conflict of interest.
Correct?
Yeah, you're declaring it abstain.
I'm declaring it, yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good evening, Penelope Cruz, planner. The subject property is shown here, outlined in pink, is approximately 18 acres. The property was the property owner submitted a site plan in 2017 to develop the property as a 138 unit townhome condominium. That submittal received a development order, in May of 2018. It met all the requirements of the Land Development Code to be developed as a townhome condominium, 138 units, as a site plan. After that site was issued a development order and construction began in July of this summer, the developer approached the staff with the intent of wanting to explore converting the project from a site plan condominium townhome development to a residential subdivision with fee simple lots, with the intent of increasing the home ownership there rather than just the plot of land that the unit is on, increasing the ownership to the land in front of and behind the unit. The intent was to maintain the same layout that was already approved as a site plan, including the amenities that were provided as a site plan, the walking trail around the pond, the common areas, the visitor parking, the larger buffers that were provided for a site plan versus what's required for a subdivision, as well as the aesthetic improvements that they're planning for the intersection of Carlisle Drive and Clyde Morris Boulevard. The applicant has stated that with that intent of wanting to maintain that same layout but increase the home ownership, the project on the ground visually is going to look exactly the same. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The only difference would be the subdivided lot lines. However, our land development code has specific criteria for residential subdivisions that do not apply to site plans. And that's why we're here today with this variance request from the applicant, because with that conversion from a site plan to a subdivision, there's these other criteria now that were not required before when it was approved as a site plan. So the first of those, as was stated, was the single point of access. The Land Development Code requires 2 points of access for a subdivision with 25 lots or more. The proposed subdivision has, and you can see right here on this graphic, has a single access road that is split with two 24 wide travel lanes, and the applicant has stated that they've designed it in this way so that if one of these points here becomes inaccessible, the other one is still available. And the fire marshal has reviewed that and is okay with that as well for emergency purposes. The second part was the minimum right-of-way width. So the Land Development Code for subdivisions requires that roads be developed with a 50-foot wide right-of-way, and that includes a 24-foot paved street, parkage, a 4-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street, and the utilities. The applicant, and you can see right down here, the right-of-way width, is proposing a 28-foot wide right-of-way. That 28-foot right-of-way would consist of 2 lanes and a 4-foot sidewalk on one side of the street. It would include 20 feet of pavement with a 2-foot curb on either side, which is the same requirement for a 50-foot right-of-way. The difference being that the typical parkage area wouldn't be there, and there would only be one sidewalk on one side of the street. But the pavement area and curbing and everything would be the same as the typical 50-foot right-of-way. So with that, the third variance is the 4-foot sidewalk on one side of the street versus 2 sides of the street. The applicant is proposing an interconnected sidewalk system. Even with it just on one side of the street, they've stated that it will be interconnected. It's going to be private and gated, but they have planned the sidewalk system to provide connectivity throughout the development, as well as connectivity to the proposed sidewalks that they will be building on Carlisle Drive, as well as the existing sidewalks on Clyde Morris. The fourth variance request is to reduce the minimum required lot area to less than 2,000 square feet, which is the minimum lot size for the R3L zoning district. The majority of the lots that are shown in the concept plan for how to transform this from a site plan to a subdivision are showing a range between 1,900 to 1,700 square feet. There's a few that are shown at 1,550 square feet. And according to the applicant, this variance request is because of the constraints of the site, wanting to maintain those amenities that were designed with the site plan, including the 30-foot buffer. Typically for the subdivision, you'd only be required to do a 10-foot buffer in the rear. They think this is a unique feature. They'd like to maintain it. They want to be able to still maintain all the specimen trees that were being maintained with the site plan. And the stormwater pond system and infrastructure the way it was planned and designed. And so because of those site constraints, the applicant is stating that is the reason why the lots can't be larger. The next one would be the building coverage, and all of these from here on kind of play hand in hand, similar to the first three. With that smaller lot, there is a increase in the maximum building coverage. Because the lots are smaller, the Land Development Code requires a 40% building coverage, and the coverage that's shown on the proposed concept plan ranges between 49% to 63%. The applicant did want to note that if you look at it as a whole, as it was designed as a site plan, if you look at it as a whole as the 18-acre site, the building coverage is met, that 40% for the site as a whole. It's just when you try to break it down lot by lot, because of trying to keep the 30-foot buffers and the other common areas and amenities, each individual lot doesn't meet it individually. Similarly, on the flip side of that, the open space requirement is the sixth variance request, kind of the flip side of the open space. So again, with that, each individual lot at this size, while trying to maintain the larger buffer and the common areas, doesn't meet the 60% open space on the individual lot, but as a whole, the applicant is stating the overall 18 acres exceeds that 60%, and their intent and their focus is to increase the ownership while still having those common facilities and trying to have a greater focus on common open space versus open space on individual private lots. With that, the last one would be the decrease in the rear yard building setback. So the Land Development Code requires a 25-foot rear building setback. You can see here on the graphic. What is proposed is a 15-foot building setback. And again, the applicant is stating that is because of trying to maintain that 30-foot perimeter buffer, as well as individual tree conservation areas throughout the property, whereas really the code only requires a 10-foot buffer for subdivision. So trying to keep those other amenities that were in place while still increasing the ownership. The staff report covered all of the variance review criteria for the subdivision variances, as well as the dimensional criteria variances. So I won't get into too much more detail about that. The applicant is here and would also like to give a presentation.
Okay. I can't take comments from Lance, can I?
Sure you can.
Yeah. Okay.
He's announced his
wanna-
conflict, so he can provide comment at this point. if
Mr.
he'd like.
Green?
No, not yet. I'll listen to the applicant first.
Did you guys want to hear from the applicant first? Let him give his
Yeah.
You want
presentation.
to hear from the applicant first?
Okay.
Okay.
He might answer some of the questions we have before we
Yeah.
ask him.
I think that's what. Joey, copy.
Oh, yes, please.
Oh, pretty pictures.
Thank you.
We like pretty pictures.
Oh, we do too. Well, the visual part of it's it's easy. It's easier to grasp if you can look at it. Just for the record, my name's Joey Posey, 420 South Nova, attorney for the applicant, and obviously Glenn Storch would probably be here if he didn't have a conflict, but I'm here instead, and we're going to walk through this PowerPoint as quick as I can because I don't want you guys to just get inundated with information here. It's, as Penny said, it's a request for an infill development. It's arguably kind of an eyesore, and these folks have taken it on to try to what's the best way we can make the best product for the city. And the initial thought is how to approach this is through condominium, obviously, and that was actually with a different owner, even though a lot of the same folks have been involved. But the new owner has did some research and said, you know what, the better product here is something that folks can actually probably take a stake in, which is that home ownership idea. Because I'm sure everybody here, it's not a hard concept to grasp that. I'd like to know that I own the lawn in front of me rather than some kind of entity that happens to own a common area that I'm not really sure I have control of anyway. So that's what this request is aimed to achieve. It's simply, how do we get from condominium form of ownership to subdivision form of ownership, which gives you that stake in the underlying lots. As Penny had mentioned, the property, it's R3L. You can see just from the surrounding zoning, obviously this is consistent. And I just wanted to illustrate, to give you an idea that, it's a residential community. There's nothing inconsistent about what's going in here. And looking at the approved plan, they've already started development because these folks obviously want to get this off the ground because, that's the business they're in. But at the same time, if there's a way we can make this project better, that's why we're here. And I don't know if this isn't meant to be a trick question, but you can tell just from me flipping those two slides that there isn't much of a difference from what you're looking at in terms of what was approved versus, I wish I could go backwards here, but I'm not that savvy with that all that's really adding is that you're getting the lot lines. And I think the only other change that we were discussing is trying to get a sidewalk out of the backyards, but that's it. It's the same development. And this is it overlaid on an aerial. As you can see, this probably gives you a better context of what we're looking at. There's residential developments that are fairly dense around it. Its sole point of access has to be off of Clyde Morris there. Just from the nature of how the property sits, that's how they're restricted. They really don't have a choice of where you come in at. The large water feature backs up to another large water feature which has a buffer, so it's going to be tough for adjoining residents to, I would imagine, even be able to see the folks on the other side. And the tree conservation easement, which Penny had mentioned earlier, is above and beyond what would be required for the subdivision ordinances, which is the intent. You know, we want to make this to maybe have a better feeling of community and that folks would get involved in the amenities, but at the same time have the benefit of owning the the lots yards in front and the back. And that's precisely what the reasons for the changes are. And you know, Penny went into the amenities with the benches. You have the trail. It's interconnected with the sidewalk that we're proposing on the plan, and the landscaping that was mentioned that would be out, that you could see out at Clyde Morrison entering the property. And this is a rendering of what the landscaping would look like. And as you can see where the entrance of the community would be at, as it's depicted there, is above oaks. And this is a picture of what you're looking at currently. I grew up in this area, so it's probably been this way since I can remember. Oh, it's not loading. Uh-oh, is it freezing? Well, oh, there we go. As you can see from the pictures that, you know, that's the idea here, that we want this to be nice. We want folks to be in here that are going to be a part of the city, have a, you know, vested interest in what Port Orange is about. And, you know, this is not what we're aimed for right here, what's existing. This is not what we want. We want, and again, the picture's loading, but as you can see from the packet, it's the same kind of idea that we can enhance the landscaping. You know, it makes it an amenity for the community, and you know, gives people a better sense of, well, you know, I really enjoy where I live. So, and that's part of what we're working with the city on right now, is to transfer that frontage of the road to add that to the development. Because as it currently sits, if we went through just the condominium plan, we don't technically have to improve that front. But that's not the intent of this owner. This owner wants to do it right. He wants to do it so it looks good, it's enhanced, and that the you know, people want to be there. Oh, we're still lagging. And this is a picture of what the elevation of what the townhomes would look like, and you know, landscaping and all. So this is a community that, you know, the vision here is, you know, it's something nice, and it's something that, how do we make it better, is pretty much why we're here today. And as Penny mentioned, the subdivision variances are being requested are solely a result of the change in ownership. That it has nothing to do with features that have changed about the plan. It has nothing to do with the trying to potentially slide past a requirement. It's just, you know, if you go and change the ownership pattern, how do you achieve the same result? Because the buildings that are going out there and the landscaping that's going out there is going to be identical. You know, then you have the one point of access, as Penny explained. You know, it's limited based on the nature of how you access this property. It's the only point of public access you can get there. And how they were, you know, the workaround for how much limited space they had was, well, if we can separate the lanes, then we can achieve that emergency vehicle access in the event of a disabled car. We can, you know, open up the other side, so you have ingress and egress. The same thing with the right-of-way area, being that, you know, it was initially designed with the right-of-way area being the same pavement that would be required in a subdivision. And the only real change that we're requesting is, well, how do we locate the utilities? And those would be pretty much on the fronts of the private property. You know, you could even do it under the asphalt if you wanted to, but the actual pavement measurement by width is the same as what would be required if this was a subdivision anyway. So there's no safety concerns in terms of people coming and going from the subdivision. And as Penny said, it's private roads and gates. And, you know, again, it's supposed to be, we're intent here is to, you know, it's supposed to be a nice and, you know, feeling of community with this development. As to the lot area, the building coverage and open space, you know, and we all know this, that townhomes by nature are supposed to be small lots. But the existing plan, as I've stated previously, is consistent with what you would expect for a townhome development as a condominium. There's no real change that's occurring. And if I had the buffer graphic up there, I think that would have been a little better here, but as you can see, if we reduce that buffer to that 10 foot, a lot of these become non-issues because that 20 feet gets backed into the lot, the building coverage shrinks, and you're playing with different numbers, but to ensure that that natural buffer is maintained and you can get those specimen trees, we didn't feel it was necessary. It didn't feel like it would be doing the subdivision a benefit by trying to recapture that area just to meet the minimum requirements, when it's better served as something that we can preserve. And there it is right there. There's the buffer. The other interesting thing to note too is that I think in the staff report I had mentioned the point of the rear yard setbacks was the trying to separate yourself from your neighbors, essentially, give you some distance. That's a hard concept to wrap my head around when you're talking about townhomes, but at the same time, if this is speaking more to the interior lots. If I was behind the if the townhome behind me had common area in between me, there's nothing I can do to screen him. It is what it is. If this was a condominium, I'm not putting up a fence that I feel is necessary because it's common area. That's not the case when you have a subdivision. Subdivision, I get to own the lawn behind me, and I get to choose how I utilize my lawn. And obviously, it needs to be consistent with the HOA, but that's kind of gives you a little extra freedom of choice, which isn't readily available for condominiums. These are the 7 variances again. They're obviously under different chapters, but these are the conditions, which are all stated in the criteria for evaluation, which are all stated in the staff report. And again, there's plenty of unique circumstances that, from what I've said, this is an infill development. There's limited access. There's actually several large trees, if you look really closely on the new plan, that we've actually carved out conservation easements for these preservation areas because we don't want to tear those down. Those are an amenity. And to recapture that lot area would do, again, it's not in line with what you'd expect for subdivision for what everybody wants us to be, which is that elevation you saw, which is that enhanced landscaping out front. And what it seems like, and I don't think this was intentional, is that the city's land development code is almost penalizing this applicant just by the nature of the condominiums versus subdivision ownership. I can understand how condominiums may have a different context if you're talking in terms of a multi-story building, but when you're talking about townhomes, it's apples and oranges almost to say that, well, on one hand you should have a building with condominium that have these certain criteria, but on the other hand, now you need different separation requirements when you're achieving the same result. It's a townhome with with lot lines, essentially. And again, it's the same thing that, it's just unnecessary and undue hardship because it's such an easy fix that it doesn't take much to get to a better product when the nature of the property is kind of necessitating a lot of these changes. And again, the sidewalk especially, I didn't get to mention that there is that interconnectivity with the trail, so it's, the idea that, folks can get around and and it meets the requirements that would otherwise probably be approved if the variances weren't or not requested, and that they move forward, and if they intend to move forward with just the condominium. And that's the idea of I would expect that to be the idea of the city's land development code, which is, we're looking towards safety, we're looking towards something that, is a good sense of community. These are the type of projects you want to encourage, and variances can be a mechanism for doing that if they're reasonable and they make sense, which I think this fits right into that. These are the other ones, again, the same statements that infill the trees, that it's already approved plan. And again, variances are case by case, so there's unique circumstances which is driving the potential for getting a variance approved tonight. There's no distinction between the ownership patterns, which seems a little arbitrary if that was the sole reason for the changes in requirements. You have the 30-foot buffer, which we're trying to preserve, which is an added amenity. And again, if you just take that buffer and back it into the lots, you're really eliminating the need for these variances, which doesn't serve the purpose of why it's there, and that's not what we want to do. So, something else I noticed in the staff report, that there were 2 neighbors that had some concerns that I wish I could find phone numbers, because I would have loved to talk to them. And again, I encourage anybody who's in the audience, if there's ever an issue, please contact our office, because we're happy to chat. And if there's a way we can make things better, that's why we're here. And things that came up were the trees, the traffic, the parking, the lot size, property values. I think a lot of the letter was aimed in general to just development, but I figured I'd address them anyway because they're concerns. As specifically to trees, a lot of the landscaping out front is not required, nor it's necessary for development at all. That they don't have to do it, and there's a number of sizable specimen trees on site that are being preserved, which again don't have to be preserved if we can stick it in a buffer, which is again not the intent of this owner. So these variances are a mechanism for achieving what I think the owner's after, which even though it may look a little rough right now, that a lot of those trees the plantings around the property are shielding the development, and that there's sizable trees which accent the community once it's going to go up, which is the idea. The traffic and the parking, there's only one point of access, so there's no impact to the adjoining developments if they were thinking somebody was going to pass through. And specifically the driveway aisles, that there's no real concern, and we can address this pretty easily if there was a condition just to say we can't park in the roads, which isn't necessary, and nor would we encourage that you would be able to park in the driveway and the 1-car garage, which is being provided for all the units. The lot sizes and property value, again, townhomes are small in nature, and that's part of what the request is for, but the property values are arguably, I think, would be better served if people own the lot. If you own the land in front and in the back, that's going to do that's obviously going to increase and be a positive effect on value. And based on the elevation that's proposed, I think this is definitely an improvement from what's already there. So these are essentially little conditions that we'd be willing to stipulate to that are being provided already on the plan. But if there was a condition for the variance, because we had also provided staff with a breakdown of every single lot, that we'd be willing to stipulate to the limitations and the criteria that we've outlined for every single lot, so there isn't they wouldn't come back with a new plan after the variances. And the 30-foot buffer we could maintain, that there you have the enhanced landscaping for the entrance, which is not required, that there's no parking in the streets, and that you're ensuring those tracks I was talking about for those easements, for those trees that are on site, that those don't just disappear. Oh, I think, and then the conclusion, that again, it's just circling back around. Nothing's changed from the approved site plan, and that the limitations of the site and the code are what really have brought us here, because we would prefer to have a better product, just for the folks that are going to be living here and the folks in general in the community already, and that they're the minimum necessary to achieve that goal. And again, this doesn't impact any of the neighbors, and if I was living out there, I would think that this is something that's positive that I would want to encourage, because there are developments out there that I wouldn't be so inclined to want next to me. So, but I'm here to answer any questions, and that's the presentation.
Mr. Green.
I'm told I can't participate because I didn't fill out the form ahead of this meeting, so I'm out on this one.
You going on break?
Huh?
You going on break?
Yeah.
Young Brady. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, you made a statement in your presentation there that said there was special conditions or circumstances that exist. What are those?
The special conditions and circumstances are the nature of the infill development in that zoning district. I don't know of arguably any other piece of property that sits with a single point of access at a corner that has surrounding existing residential around it and is attempting to make use of the property conditions as they lie. The other part to this too is that it is a little after the fact, but that you have the existing condominium development, and that the inconsistencies in the code are what kind of are driving this. That the requirements as they're stated in subdivisions as they apply to townhomes don't really make sense, because I could do the same thing as a condo when I could get a better product under the same regulations as a subdivision, which those are the circumstances in which we find, or essentially of witness it, of the variances.
So you could theoretically do a subdivision development here and meet all of the code requirements as is?
Condo.
They already are.
Now as a residential, as a subdivision?
I mean, I'd have to concede the point, but I think that's true of any property.
Okay.
You know, I could subdivide at any low density and probably make utilization of it, so, just to be fair, I think.
In other words, you don't have to have this particular development the way it's designed. It's possible to go ahead and redo the design as a subdivision and meet all the LDC requirements.
Again, that's true to the extent that applies to every property, that I could subdivide any piece of property
Okay.
and that would be true.
Cool. I'm all set.
Mike?
Yeah, I think as we go forward, because Lance and I think, were the only ones who were on this planning commission when this first came through the first time. And I think that was during right in the beginning of the downturn. And I agree with you. I'm like, okay, we approved it for 138 homes. It's just because of the change from a condominium to townhome project and all the other things. I mean, I like the idea of increasing the buffer, maintaining the trees, stuff like that. And I think the project will definitely enhance the properties around it. So, I mean, I don't really have any other technical questions.
Bob?
First off, the buffer is all the way around the property, correct?
Correct. Well, follows the.
Jim Paytas Homes, one of the partners in the Gatlin 2, owner of Gatlin 2. And yes, it is. It goes around 3/4 of it. There's well, actually, yes, everywhere except the entry point.
Right.
So yes, all 4 sides. There's a buffer all the way around.
So it's screened all the way around?
Exactly.
30 feet, okay. That's all I have right at the moment.
Okay.
Miss Bills Benet?
I had, one question was, are we approving each of these variances individually and voting on them individually? Or is it a lump sum kind of thing?
Well, I can, to answer that, a lot of the variances are interrelated with each other. So if one is denied, the others
Then the
don't,
others will just
they
kinda
just don't, the math doesn't work anymore.
Okay. Who is going to maintain the property on Clyde Morris that you're beautifying? Is that gonna be maintained by the HOA of the townhomes?
The goal here is that if we can transfer it to the city, we would enter into an agreement, the HOA most likely, to make sure that that is maintained, and then the city would have assurance that they can come enforce any plantings that are missing, or if, you know, some of the signage looks a little off.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the idea.
Okay. That's the only question I have.
Mr. Junko?
Couple of questions pertaining to the item 3. You're going to a 4-foot wide sidewalk. What is the minimum for an ADA public sidewalk for people in wheelchairs? 4 feet. So you're at 4 feet minimum right now. That's why you're probably asking for it. Okay. In my experience in some of these local subdivisions, I'm trying to get a dimension from the edge of the house to the edge of the road, but I don't see one. My concern is you don't want people parking in the street. But there are various cases where a car, they have more than 2 people.
Should be.
I don't see I see them to the center line of the road, the crown, but I do not see the edge of the house to the edge of the street. My point is, if you were to stack 2 cars or 2 trucks back to back, will the tail end of the second truck cover the sidewalk?
Penelope Cruz, planner. So staff has looked at their concept plan for their subdivision. They have not officially submitted their subdivision yet, but we have looked with their engineer at this concept plan. Couple things. They are proposing to provide 1 car garage, so that's 1 space, and then a driveway that meets the requirements for 2 cars without going over the sidewalk.
Without obstructing
and
the sidewalk.
the dimension for the sidewalk is not being requested to be vary from what's required. The standard is 4 feet.
Okay.
What they are asking for is to not have to build it on each side of the street,
Right.
only have to build it on one side of the
Okay.
street.
All right. And again, their length won't conflict with what they currently have designed for 2 cars subjecting into the sidewalk area, if they were.
Not from what we've seen on the concept plan, but that will be reviewed through the DRC process once they submit
Because
again.
it defaults to people parking in the street.
Yeah, no.
Because then you cover the sidewalk.
Well, that wouldn't.
And then people
yeah.
end up parking in the street.
I mean,
So
that would be a technical comment
Right.
at DRC, and it wouldn't. Yeah, but
Okay,
so
well,
what we've
note
seen,
that.
because they want to make sure that they can get through with only these variants and not have to come back again. So
Right.
the plans that they have showed us don't
Well,
create that situation.
That's one issue I'd like to make a note so that you review that, so you make sure you don't destroy what you're trying to do. You're putting a sidewalk in there, you're minimizing the size, and you get 2 cars in the driveway, and it ends up blocking the sidewalk, and then they end up parking on the street, so.
Here it is.
I also, oh, I'm sorry.
It's, I just spotted it on here. I think if I'm reading this right, it's 22 feet.
What drawing was that on?
Yeah.
I misspoke. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's a 1-car driveway, 1-car garage with visitor parking that typically wouldn't be required for a subdivision, but they are maintaining the visitor parking that they planned for so that there is not parking on the street when they were doing their site plan.
And just to point out, to draw your attention to where, if you're looking to the left side of where the drive aisle is, the left drive aisle, you can see on the right-hand side of that drive aisle all those.
Even with my glasses.
Oh.
I can see these.
I wish I had.
Really?
Well, there's.
Yeah, if you go on our agenda, which is the
Here.
drawing in our packet, I could blow
Right
that
here.
up.
I'm on page 29.
Page 29.
It's on my
Yeah, I was looking at our presentation material prior to that, so it's in probably one of these engineering
I
drawings
can get
haven't
it.
seen.
I can get it up in 1 second.
There's a substantial number of guest parking spots, that's the idea.
Okay.
That you take advantage of the 2 spots you have at your home. If there's an overflow, there's plenty of guest parking.
Define substantial. I mean,
Depending
tell me how many and where are they
He's
located?
never been to one of my
Is
parties.
that better?
Well, there you go. I
Is that better, John?
Well, I-
We're not seeing
I
it.
see
Okay.
you.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, so now I lost everything. Okay.
So there's.
All right, so I see 37 from the crown of the road to the edge of the house, and then I see 12 feet from, is that the edge of the house, or?
No, that's just the easement.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I don't see a full dimension
I'm-
showing.
I'm seeing it right here on the drawing. It's on page 29 of the PDF.
29?
And I'm looking at it, and you have to kind of look for it.
It should be
It's
22.
22 feet is what I'm seeing.
Okay, that should
From
be.
that would, I'm
Right.
assuming
From
that's
either
from
the
the.
curb or the sidewalk on the other side.
John.
So that 22
Yeah,
feet
I'm getting to
maintains
it.
both sides.
I have it blown up right
Okay,
now.
there we go.
I don't know where you want to go, but
No,
feel
there we
free.
go.
And also to
Okay.
clarify too, the number's 35 guest parking spots, so.
35, for the whole complex,
Correct.
35.
Additional.
Additional in it,
Additional.
that you have the 2 you can park with the garage, and then 35 additional.
All right, just curious, I'm a builder myself. Will the after effect of this actually increase the value of the homes?
Oh, in my professional opinion, yes. I mean,
So
I'm only an
basically
attorney,
they-
but.
So this is a profitable venture as
Whatever-
well?
Whatever
If you
help
said-
that gives you.
If you said no, you get fired right here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I mean,
but
I think it's a function of a little bit of logic that if I own more square footage, then you would think that the value of my home would increase, and that would kind of have a ripple effect in the area too, just because I own more land. I own more of.
Yeah, so from a builder's perspective, you can ask for more money if this variance goes through and the
Well,
property becomes more valuable.
That's a could ask. You don't necessarily have to.
But you're not directly answering, but will the direct result of this variance have a direct result on the?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think it would, because
Okay.
that makes financing easier.
Okay,
That
all right.
makes
Well,
that
there's
makes
other motivations. I'm just trying to get it all out. that's
exactly,
all.
and that
Okay.
makes providing for these amenities a lot easier for and less of a burden on the developer.
Okay.
All right, back to me.
I'm good, thank you.
Back to you.
All right, I met with Mr. Paytas yesterday, and he described much of this to me, and I saw most of these drawings, and answered most of my questions yesterday from the developer. I do want to say that the change from a fee simple townhome ownership or to that from a condominium, the development is staying the same. what they're doing basically is, instead of owning a condominium unit, you're actually gonna get a deed to the earth below it. And there'd be a difference in whether there's a condominium association or a homeowner association. And my concern that I expressed to Mr. Padish yesterday that I want answered today is that the rules and binding of the homeowners association be as strong as it would be if it would be a condominium association. And specifically things like, and staff may need to speak to this, the enforcement. If the city, if the HOA takes over the maintenance of that entranceway out to Clyde Morris, we want to make sure that in 10, 15, 20, 25 years that an HOA is still existing that's going to be doing that.
Again, we talked about that, and the way I address that is today, we have the control of the community. We insert all of our rules and regulations and reserves, and we set everything up according to or to exceed what your concerns are. Like Joey mentioned, the out front along Clyde Morris, that will be an agreement with the city that the homeowner association maintains, just like all the common areas, the gates, everything that we do typically in a neighborhood. And the way I look at it is either it's a condominium association or a homeowner association. It's kind of regulated the same way with the developer in control of it until it's turned over to a board, whether it's a condo board or a homeowner association board. And I've turned over a few in my career, and they're all still look well. But as we talked, just being honest, all we can do is set up the best we can possibly do. But that will hold true with a homeowner association or a condo owners association. We know historically there's been issues with condo owners association where people don't pay the dues, and that's what we started all these new laws about being able to foreclose and get our dues back out. So we go through that anywhere. I don't see that as being a change, but nobody can make any promises.
And if I could just echo what Jim was saying too, that what I would expect to happen is that if this was a condominium, you probably have folks that are looking at this as more of somewhere to stay on occasion. If you're looking at in terms of fee simple ownership, there's probably more of a vested interest in the community of, well, this is probably where I want to live. So I would expect, if that plays out, that the subdivision form of ownership, because of that vested interest, folks will probably take a little more care with their community in maintaining their HOA, and as opposed to the condominium, just because of that distance between, what's happening. They may not even be living here. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because if you look at in Venetian Bay, I think it's Park Lane or whatever, those townhomes that are in there, during the downturn it became nothing but all rentals and low rent rentals. I mean, and so, yeah, you're right. I mean, think with home ownership compared to a condominium, you not somebody who owns a home more than likely isn't going to rent it out very rarely.
Something to point out as well is our concept here is to operate it similar to a condo association with exteriors, roofs, yards, landscaping, everything being maintained as a package, to be able to at least control that from a association standpoint. So.
I'm happy. Any more questions? Any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Okay.
For Penny. If this was being submitted as a condominium development, which of those variances would still stand?
It already did get submitted as a condominium.
But right now, today?
None. This development, as it's shown today, minus the lot lines, got a development order in May for the same exact layout. The only change is that they wanted to put lot lines on it and sell the front and back yards. And because of that change, these variances are required. But the layout is exactly the same as the site plan that they got a development for in May.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Penny, if you could. He made a statement earlier, if it moves to a subdivision and the possibility of individual owners putting fences up in the backyard, is that feasible? Is that realistic with setbacks, and is that allowed? Will that be allowed?
We've got, on their property lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But that would be
Thanks.
dependent upon the HOA, right?
Yeah, I mean, the HOA might have their own restrictions
Yeah.
in their covenants,
There-
but, yeah.
Let me ask you a question too, Penny. Stay there.
Mhm.
The other, there was one project over by Yorktown Extension, over by the school.
Cornerstone?
Yeah, Cornerstone. Did we require them to have visitor parking? 'Cause I remember we had
They
issues
have,
with
yeah.
that.
Yes, they did.
Okay, so, all right, just wanna make sure. 'Cause that's
Mr. Chair, I got a
similar.
question.
Yes, sir.
From a perspective of the city, now, if this gets put through, it also adds more value to individuals' property, and therefore, probably the property taxes will go up because of their ownership of the acquired property?
I'm not a property appraiser. I mean, I think that's a reasonable assumption, but I couldn't say that. I don't have those.
But I'm just
credentials.
looking at, from a city's perspective, wouldn't city taxes increase because of their ownership?
I think that's a reasonable assumption, but I don't think I'm qualified to make that statement.
Did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express though?
In a quick perspective to look at that is when we now add a piece of property underneath the building. So, you know, my answer to that was it has to, because now we're adding the value of the property rather than being a.
Yeah, well, that's a
overall.
win for the city in a way. so.
And with an excess, that the city would be so inclined to lower their millage too, right? No.
That ain't up to
Yeah.
us.
Boy, you
Listen,
are-
not for
That's walking
138
fine
hours.
lines.
We're out.
That was last night.
Come September 5th.
Oh.
Yeah.
Talk about that one.
Any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, I wondered if the two people that wrote the letters are here tonight.
We got public
Public
comments
comments.
coming up
All right,
soon.
good.
Any public comments? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please. That's fine.
Yeah.
You can hold your hand if you
You
want.
can do whatever you want.
I
Well,
don't
not
need anybody to
whatever.
hold my
but-
hand. Okay, I'm Teresa Newcomb, 4060 Carlisle Drive.
Newton, very good name.
Ernie Newcomb.
Yeah. And since the land has been cleared, we have realized that there's a lot of standing water. And we already have somewhat of a drainage problem where the mosquito control is not holding up their end of the deal in a canal that's along the back west side of our property. And also, based on interaction that we've had that has not always been positive with an adult division north of us, there's been a lot of runoff, which causes a lot of flooding on our property. We need some assurance, based on all the water that we're seeing standing out there now, we need some assurance that in no way will this construction be done in such a way that excess water runs off onto our property. And we have even noticed,
The wetlands.
what's that?
The wetlands, so it's a
Yeah,
situation.
well, it looks like wetlands to me. I don't know the real definition of
There's
wetlands.
been a lot of
but-
rain lately.
Pardon me?
There's been a lot of rain lately.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, even in times when there's not a lot of rain, there's a,
Yeah,
it's low land.
Mhm.
And we've lived there since the 50s, so we know what the land consists of. We've also noticed that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, Conservation, whatever, has been out there quite a bit in the last, I don't know, week, 2 or 3 days. And there's concern over water being pumped off of that land into a canal, and it's muddying up the water and that sort of thing. That I don't want that sediment to settle and then cause water to back up and cause us to have flooding on our property.
If I could answer that, Mr. Chair,
Go right
they
ahead.
do submit a drainage plan, part of the engineering. The engineer designs it. They will calculate water, how much it's holding, where the runoffs are going, retention pond areas, vegetation areas. If you see some of the subdivisions that Patus has done, Cypress Head, it also has the same type of drainage situation. So the only gray area is it's hard to do during construction when you're moving dirt around. But I assure you, the city would not have approved the drainage plan or the engineering if the final product with the vegetation and the grass and the sod and the runoff, the crowns of the road, all the swells, all that
Yeah.
stuff will be incorporated to properly calculate the runoffs.
I was actually gonna say,
We wouldn't, if it was wetland and was
Wasn't.
protected, they wouldn't be allowed to touch it.
right.
Okay.
I was actually gonna say with the retention pond,
Well,
with the retention that they're building, at the end of the day, it's gonna end up helping you,
Yeah.
more than hurting you. But
That's-
during
that's good to hear.
construction, that's gonna be a little
It's
different.
tough to promise something during construction,
Yeah.
because there's no pretty way to do it. I mean, you got bulldozers moving a lot of mud around.
No, that's
But
understandable.
When they
Yeah.
start
But when
doing
it's done, it will help
yeah,
you.
it'll get better.
Okay, we're getting educated, thank you.
It's my
Who,
pleasure.
Okay.
who's supposed to maintain that ditch? Is that
Pardon me?
city? The ditch? Has it
The
been
canal.
cleaned out in any time?
No, they're not. Now they're saying that we built the ditch, and
Oh.
we didn't. They did.
Who's
And they're
saying?
fighting us,
Who's they?
mosquito control.
Oh.
And they're saying that because we built it,
You might check with the city community or with community development and find out. They might have it in their plat plans from long, those years.
They might
back.
have a
They may
history of
not.
how that was developed.
They
But-
might be able to help you out. yeah.
with
we-
city development,
Commu-
That's,
Where?
that's them.
Just threw Penny
No,
under the
Penny
bus.
tell
That's,
you.
yeah, that's Penny.
Leave your contact information with us. We'll get in touch with you, and then we'll also have, we'll get you the site inspector for the city that's on site every day monitoring the construction. We'll get him your information, so if you have any concerns during construction, you can call BJ up, he's our site inspector, and let him know if you see anything during construction going on that just doesn't seem right, okay?
yeah, that's
So,
fine.
give us
I'll
your
give her the
information, and we'll give
information.
you a call tomorrow.
Thank you.
all right.
Now, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Are you good?
No, I have one other thing to say.
Okay, one more thing.
I realize that times have changed since they built some of these adult communities around us, but they used to call it a percolator test. And I know that's probably, I'll be the first to admit, that's probably an old terminology, where they would go in and see where the water level was. And even though it said that it would never have been approved to build in the first place, if it didn't meet certain qualifications, it didn't meet certain qualifications back then, and they went ahead and did it.
Didn't apply for
And
it.
it caused extensive flooding on their property. So if you think I'm being skeptical, it's only because of previous experience.
Totally
I
understand.
understand.
Totally understand.
Okay,
Totally
and I just
understand.
wanted to make sure that you had it on the record that we expressed these concerns. So
It's in
that,
our minutes.
yeah, we would not be able to come back and say, well, we expressed this to you, and we were hoping that you would listen to us and take us seriously.
We
We're
have,
good
Totally
neighbors.
appreciate you.
Yeah, and we're good neighbors.
We're here for you guys, so
Yeah.
we're here to represent you guys.
Well, we're good neighbors, we're not troublemakers. We just don't want to,
Peaceful coexistence, huh?
yeah, well, we just don't want to be flooded. And we can just have,
Totally.
a little bit of a hurricane, and because of this previous situation that was approved, the water floods us almost all the way up to the backyard, which is how many feet probably?
200.
So, I mean, and it's a lake. So we don't want, if that's already existing, we don't want something else to come in and get it from both
Impede it,
sides.
yeah.
Right.
All right. I got who did I ask a question about the entrance over Clyde Morris?
It's not
Anybody
us.
here can answer?
You'd probably have to ask
That's
them or
Jimmy
the
or-
developer.
Depends what your question is.
Oh, Clyde Morris, what the width of the road there?
For Carla,
Yeah, Carlisle.
Yeah.
it's a 50-foot right of way.
50
And measured
feet.
from what? What are the measurement point from what to what?
It's the whole right of way, so
The whole right-of-way.
in that right of way,
All right.
is where they'll build the sidewalks, the grassed area, the paved
The
road.
trees?
The trees will be
All right.
outside.
What is that total width we're talking about? The
For the roadway, it's a 50-foot roadway.
50 foot, so right in the center here, 25, and that does not include the trees, you say?
No, they'll probably be on the outs.
Be 50
outskirts of
plus.
that. Do you have
Yeah, hey, we saw a picture there.
That might be a good picture.
There you go.
So,
Yes, sir, that's us right
right
here.
away.
All right.
Yeah, this is the entry to the storage area. And are you guys in this house right here?
Yeah, huh?
Oh, okay, this is you right here, yeah.
Mm-hmm, that's it right here.
Yeah, so
So-
the right of way is out here along this.
This includes 50?
Yeah, yeah, that.
So the trees are gonna be more than 50?
Well, no, actually, the trees have to be inside the right of way, I'm sorry, 'cause here, this has to
Oh,
be
all
the
right.
right
Oh,
of way.
that's-
They have to be inside, so they won't be in your front yard,
Be
they'll
on-
be
be
in
on
the
the
right.
50.
Yeah, they'll be in
Okay,
the 50.
that's it right here,
Yeah.
all right. Now we're talking.
Yeah, we're trying to give you a nice little buffer
All right.
thing there.
Since we're talking,
Sure.
what's the possibility of, what's gonna be down the other
We,
side
we,
right
we
here?
need to move
Adding
the.
some flowers to your garden, he'll do it for you. I'm just
We
kidding.
got our little shop going here.
All right, we need to move the,
I gotta get-
we need to
get-
move
get-
meeting
man with the knowledge.
along.
Can you guys talk after the
They will
meeting,
check,
maybe?
yeah.
Yeah.
I should know.
He wants
Yeah,
a
we
couple
still
orange
got-
trees.
we still
and-
got public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically, they have 3 minutes.
Thank you guys for coming up,
We've
though.
had quite a
Just
bit
pass it
more,
along.
but we allowed it. I
Yes.
allowed it. Is there any more public comments?
Yeah, you have one right there, Newton.
Okay, please step forward. I need your name and address for the record.
Yes, Phil Stewart, 3974 Sunset Cove Drive.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, what I want to do is, these guys make it sound good, and that is good. But you got to remember, for you guys and everybody else, how many builders have asked for 7 variances? And it's only going to make it tougher with you, with future builders, and and former builders are going to say, hey, how could you guys do this when I asked for those things? And it's just going to make it tougher for you in the city, if you know what I mean. Hey, I understand what they're saying. It all sounds good, but it's for it's for a certain group of people, and you guys, the city, and you guys are the ones that are going to put up with everything that comes from. Because it's always going to be tougher for every builder now that comes in and says, why did you guys do this for them and not me? And why does that variance go and not for me? If you know what I mean.
Yes, sir.
And I know you guys do a great job. I just moved here 2 years ago, and the place is really good. And you do look out for everybody. Thank you.
One thing I will explain to you is this has already been approved to be built the same footprint, the same buildings, the same shapes, heights, everything, has a condominium.
Right,
And it's under construction as we speak.
right.
The thing that they're asking for the variances for is so that it fit into the rules so that they can sell them as townhome, fee simple, which is a technical title term, instead of as a condominium unit. And so everything is gonna remain the same, so
Yeah, but I'm
they're
saying,
really
but
only
they'll-
asking to change a few rules to make it fit into another rule book.
Yeah, but 7 variances when other people are gonna want, because, the building's getting, Port Orange is growing a lot. So it's just gonna make it tougher on you guys. Every builder that comes in, everybody wants to start
sir.
development, they're gonna use this as a precedent, say, hey, why did you
And we
do that?
hear-
You know what I
Mr. Chair,
mean?
if I may,
Personally, thank you, go ahead.
on this current board, there are 2 general contractors here, Lance and myself. How we review these, whether or not they have any influence of what we do, is basically how do they impact the city and how do they impact the residents. So they are looked individually, and they're looked
Case by case.
case by case. So this will not, even how I vote on this, will not work to my advantage or disadvantage in the future because every case is uniquely different. We've never really seen common cases brought to us except for gas signs that are digital. That's about it. That was a rare one over the years. But other than that, they're very unique cases, and this is proof of one of them.
Yeah.
And this is
Okay.
an infill
Yeah.
project, so infill project compared to just raw land is a totally different thing.
Okay, thank you.
And we're pretty tough, so we'll take them on.
Are there any more public comments? There being none, any more questions from the board?
I don't have a question, really. I had a conversation with Jim yesterday, and my concern is going forward, and Mr. Stewart, was that your name, I'm sorry?
Yes,
My concern was the same thing, was going forward in the future, we're setting a precedent to allow 7 variances in this case to create a subdivision. And I think the project's fantastic, and I understand it's an infill project. We have unique circumstances. A lot of times when you try to do an infill project, but there's no special circumstances. The attorney said there was, the documents here say there's not. But if we allow cutting back on the setbacks, if we allow cutting back on the easements, if we allow cutting back on 7 different things, there is quite likely the opportunity for another developer to come in and say, well, gee, you gave this particular project 7 variances, I'd like the same thing. I don't want to have to build the townhomes, I want to go fee simple. I get that, it makes better sense, but at the same time, we're now setting a precedent, and we've had people come to us before that said, well, you did it for these 3 other projects, I want the same thing. That's my concern.
I understand what he's saying, but the circumstances seem to be quite unique here, I think, in terms of the fact that it's pre-approved previously as a condo. So the deviation is really the fact that we're changing the description of the project. So, you know, with that in mind, I don't see that, I don't see a flurry of those types of applications. I may be wrong, but it just, it seems very unique to me.
And I think what you're getting with the larger buffer and maintaining the trees is a plus compared to what it could be.
Right.
Could have been.
Yeah,
had been built
and to
as a
add to
condo.
what Bo said, is this was already submitted and approved. And that's the case right there. It was submitted and approved, and then during the course of construction, they had a light bulb pop up with this idea. If a builder was to come up here and submit this to the city first time and ask for concessions, that is inappropriate because it's already been approved. So there's a difference between at the time it was approved. If you try to say, I want to do this, first viewing, first consumption plan, by the way, I want to throw 7 variances in here because I had it with another, that's inappropriate, and I don't even think this building department would look at it the same way either. So to add to Bo, I agree with him.
I would be asking a different set of questions.
Yeah, exactly. It's a precedence in time.
One question, do we need to stipulate anything in our motion about the entranceway and getting reaching an agreement with the city on that? Because I want to see the entranceway as it's proposed happen.
I think that'll come later on in the process.
You mean on Clyde Morris?
Yes.
The subdivision plans are gonna come back before this board, and so, if they don't have that in their subdivision plat and plans, then you can say like, hey guys, what happened?
Okay. Any more discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve case number 18-900000004.
Second.
Motion and second, call the roll, please.
Time out, hold on.
Oh, with,
It's
Is
got
that,
7
so
of
that
them.
motion to approve, it's to approve each and every one of the variances?
It's a group deal or nothing,
It's
really.
a group,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Variance 1 through 7. Do I need to stipulate that?
There we go.
As stated.
That's why I asked earlier, Matt.
Yes.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. Motion carries.
You guys gotta stay for the rest of the meeting now. I got a lot to say.
He had to stay quiet this whole time. We're in for it now.
The word has come out.
We are in for it now.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
You still,
All right, we're gonna call case number 18-52000001. Modification to an approved development order, Westport Reserve, Phase 4, north side of Town West Boulevard, east of Tomoka Farms Road. A request by the applicant to amend the previously approved subdivision plat and plans for Westport Reserve, Phase 4, to reduce the number of single-family lots from 78 to 71, along with associated subdivision improvements.
I don't usually hear that.
Ms. Perney.
Gwen Perney, planner. Yes, this request is the development order modification to the already approved subdivision plat and plans for Phase 4 of Westport Reserve. In December 2017, the City Council approved the final plat and plans for the subdivision, which then consisted of 78 single-family lots with associated subdivision improvements, streets, sidewalks, utilities, stormwater, and landscaping. Plat has not been recorded. The property owner has requested a modification to the approved plat and plans, and according to the Land Development Code, minor changes to a plat that has not been recorded must be reviewed through the same process, and therefore the proposed minor changes must be reviewed by the Planning Commission and reviewed and approved by the City Council before it can be recorded. The proposed modifications, to the plat and plans include, they're highlighted in blue in your, on the screen. It's removing Don Pedro Way and 7 single-family lots and expanding the stormwater pond along Town West Boulevard. The proposed modifications result in 71 single-family lots with a net decrease of 7 lots. Staff has reviewed the proposed modifications for compliance with the Land Development Code and verified that public facilities and services such as roads, public infrastructure, schools, and recreational facilities are currently available to serve the proposed 71 residential lots. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed development order modification to the Westport Reserve Phase 4 subdivision final plat and plans.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
This is easy. Reducing lots.
Oh, darn.
Making a bigger pond, and
Adding retention.
I'm good.
Mr. Jordan.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Arminio.
Good.
Mr. Bofemic.
I'm with it.
Ms.
Good.
Mills Benet.
I'm good.
Mr. Junko.
I'm fine.
I am also fine.
The applicant's here if you do have any questions.
Would the applicant like to approach and talk us out of it?
Do you have to come up here to get paid?
Well, let's don't let him charge another tenth. So. Is there any other questions of the board? Any public comments? No public comments? No questions of the board? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve case number 18-52000001.
Second.
Moved in second. Please call the roll.
Vance Green?
Yes.
John Junko?
Yes.
Maria Mills-Bennett?
Yes.
Bo Volkney?
Yes.
Mike Arminio?
Yes.
Thomas Jordan?
Yes.
Newt White?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
Yay, us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for waiting through it.
Don't you wish they were all this fast?
And that, I mean, reduce the lots, that's easy.
That should have been first.
Lower density, less cars on the street. I'm good.
Oh, darn.
Okay, case number 18-25000006. Moratorium on personal wireless communications ungoverned by Chapter 16, Section 9 of the Land Development Code. A 3-month moratorium on the submittal of site plans, subdivisions, conditional use, special exception, and change of use applications, and the issuance of development orders, building permits, or zoning verification letters for personal wireless communications governed by Chapter 16, Section 9 of the Port Orange Land Development Code. Mr. Berman.
Tim Berman, Community Development. I think Chairman White pretty much summed up what we're doing. Basically, we're requesting a 3-month moratorium on the personal wireless communications so we can look at our code there. Any future code amendments we brought back before the board and then on to City Council. Again, it's for 3 months, and we, currently working on it. We'll be bringing it back here shortly.
Mr. Junko, any questions?
Considering how the city council meeting went this Tuesday, and the fact that this was one issue that had slipped through the cracks and almost bit us in the butt, I think this is a very wise idea. I think it's coming at the right time, and it's probably has to do with our city maintaining the same way it should be, and taking steps to prevent things from repeating itself like it's previously happened. So I think this is a wonderful idea. And I have absolutely no issue with this.
Ms. Mills Benet.
I second what John said.
Mr. Bofen.
I'm good.
Mr. Arminio.
Yeah, as I was at the council meeting as well, what kind of challenge are we going to have to change some of these properties that possibly have this GPU, then this can be allowable in areas that we don't want them to be? What kind of challenge do you think we're gonna have?
We haven't made the decisions yet. We're working with an expert, telecommunications expert, to review and revise the code. We'll have to address those as they come up, but we haven't really gotten that far into it. This calls time out for us to be able to review and have those discussions.
Breathing room.
Yeah.
Has anything arised since Tuesday? Because this was really, I mean, we had Bob Ford, Councilor Ford was pretty hot, and Jake was, you know, looking at it from a more perspective of make sure we could calmly come to a conclusion where all parties are. Has there been any general areas within the city that may comply with AT&T's a location for the tower as opposed to where it originally was wanting to get installed?
So we're currently working with AT&T. We don't have anything concrete yet. You know, this moratorium is to update the code. There may be other properties out there where AT&T, you know, could viably locate. In fact, the property that they're looking at could potentially fit as well. So
Now,
they haven't submitted the site plan yet, but
well, I'll
we
throw
expect that to
this
be coming
out
soon.
there. If the city does their research and finds an isolated piece of property that may be adequate for their services and has to be rezoned, I don't think it would be an issue within the city planning board or the city council to rezone it through voting to accommodate this so it doesn't repeat itself.
I don't think you can do that, right?
We're working the issue. We'll continue to
Well,
do that.
this is a rare case, that's why I'm throwing these situations.
I think this item is basically, like Matt said, basically just get the moratorium, stop the clock here so we can evaluate that stuff.
All right.
We need to get this through so we can start evaluating.
Okay. Yeah, that's, you know, after being at that meeting, I mean, it was, you know, I get that, you know, you feel for the folks. Nobody's gonna come out of this feeling good about themselves. I don't care what, you know, we can say, you know, I mean, other than the fact that the tower goes somewhere else, but, I get it. I mean, you know, you guys are kinda handcuffed a little bit.
It's tough. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and we don't wanna set the city up for, you know, legal issues.
Mr. Jordan?
3 months enough?
So as drafted, we're gonna have opportunity to extend for 30-day periods as needed. We are trying to quickly move to make sure we get these in place quickly. We think 3 months will be sufficient. However, if we need to extend, we can do so, or council will be able to do so by resolution.
Okay.
Good. Let me ask this, I'm sorry. Will this stop or slow down this project going forward or no? Because it's already after the fact?
We're reviewing that.
Okay.
Mr. Green?
Are we gonna talk about this after, this, but we can talk about this during just regular council comments, correct, Matt?
The
Or we gonna talk-
moratorium?
Huh? Yeah, or talk about the subject? Cell
Of the
tower subject?
Of the
after?
moratorium or just
No,
in general?
Yeah, in general?
In general, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I'm good for now.
I didn't skip you, did I, Tom?
No.
Okay.
No.
What I asked Tim yesterday about this is when they're considering, and Matt, don't run away. You know, the technology has changed obviously since this code was written in the land development code, and the ability to build taller freestanding structures that meet wind loads and stuff. The construction and technology and the communications technology, that I'd like to see this written in such a way that we're technology proofing ourselves. I don't know if that's even a word, but I was saying that, you know, when this was written, I don't think we may not even had cell phone towers everywhere, or the ability to build something that was 120, 30 feet tall, that was freestanding without guy wires and stuff. I would like to see that when during this moratorium, that we put things in place that's gonna limit the heights and call for the appearances. Is that something that's reasonable to expect out of this?
All regulations in Chapter 16, Section 9 of the Land Development Code will be considered you will see revisions. It's too early to tell you what those revisions will be.
Things that I would like for them to be if they're possible.
Well, you know, I brought up the last meeting when we were talking about this tower that we couldn't vote on, was that when we were doing, and we talked about this before, about the wind turbines, and they had to be 150 feet up and the sustained winds, and it had to have the same stability that you would have a tower, but in order for that thing to fall, and to take into consideration the swaying and it falling over, it had to have at least 150 circumference all the way around it to fall. So why can't these be lumped into the same category?
We're looking at that as a code requirement.
Okay. Just making that.
And those are all things that we're looking
This
into.
is everything what's in that code that they're gonna address within this 90 days.
Because if that could, I mean, because if we're asking for one tower to have this huge circumference around it, but we're not asking for the same thing for these towers. And I get it. I mean, it's, you know, this happened. It's something, a fluke thing that you just got by. It's going to happen again if we don't fix it. I'm with you.
Are there any public comments?
You gotta come up and speak. State your name for the record and address.
I'm Walt Cagney.
Social security number.
Last four.
I'm related to somebody. But anyway, I live at 830 Pine Forest Trail West, which is where the tower was going to be. Or who actually test towered for wind shear and?
We don't know. Probably engineering.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you talk about the wind turbines. You know, you don't see very many of those in this neck of the woods. You know, so how that wouldn't be, you know, apply to us. So you know, who gets hurricanes? Florida. So I mean, are there towers in Miami or Panama City? I mean, do they have towers that, you know, have been tested? I mean, I'm glad it's on the back burner for now, but you know, just in the future, how, you know, who writes the specifications for the tower?
The engineers.
I think the engineers for that's probably a question for
An AT&T engineer. He'll submit a generic drawing that's good for all the towers.
Right.
Submit it to the city. The city has questions. They'll ask them to clarify.
And has history.
I'm sorry?
And has history.
I can't go into details. I can just give you an approximation how it works.
Sure.
An engineer that's licensed to be able to calculate wind strengths and tower strengths based on height and environment and wind load calculations from beach projections to mainland projections are all incorporated into this. Mm-hmm. And then there's a sealed set of drawings from an engineer that has their license on it, and it's submitted to the city, and then they make the review and then the suggestions. And if there's comments, they bring it back to the client that's submitting it and ask for these changes until all things are met to the satisfaction of the city, and then the city approves it by issuing a permit.
Sure. All right, well, that's good. We'll see.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
No more questions?
I'll make a motion to approve case 18-250000006.
Second. Motion and second. Call the roll.
Lance Green?
Yes.
John Ginkle?
Yes.
Maria Mills Burnett?
Yes.
Bo Volkman?
Yes.
Mike Arminio?
Yes.
Thomas Jordan?
Yes.
Nick White?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Case number 18250000007. Land Development Code Text Amendment, Chapter 17, Section 26. Amendment to Chapter 17, Section 26 of the Land Development Code to remove the requirement for a public hearing to establish a permitted use in the government public use zoning district.
This ought to be interesting.
Penelope Cruz, planner. Basically what Commissioner White just said, trying to make this category consistent with all the other zoning categories in the city of Port Orange and most municipalities throughout the United States.
So we're removing letting the public know that these things are coming forward, or?
Okay, so any zoning category has a list of permitted uses.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a list of permitted uses, you're not required in any other zoning category to go to a public hearing. I'm sure you all felt a little awkward last month having to have a public hearing and not being able to vote because it's a permitted use.
Right.
This is the only category that has that strange kind of regulation. So they still have to meet, you know, whatever permitted use is there. And who knows what they're gonna be in that particular category when we come out of this moratorium or what have you. But whatever permitted use is in that category would still have to follow the development review process, just like every other zoning category. We're just trying to make it consistent with the rest of the code and the rest of the zoning categories.
So you got a lot of work to do. Because this isn't the only case that you're gonna have, or this type of case, I'm sure.
This is the only zoning that I've ever seen in my life that has anything like this.
Like this.
And you identified, I think, how many parcels were in that particular zoning category?
Yeah, there was a map that showed them in the
Yeah.
staff report. I think it ended up being, what was it, like 1,265 acres total, something like
Right.
that. I mean, a lot of that's city property. It's the Spruce Creek Preserve that's got covenants and restrictions to, it can only be a park. So a lot of the GPU properties are municipally owned properties, or a lot of them are, you know, there's churches and things like that. But, you know, it's just trying to make sure that it's consistent with the other zoning categories as far as process.
Is that the parcel that's by Doris Leeper? That's
There's a big chunk of
It's
that,
got
the
covenants
225
and
acres that the city purchased and worked with Volusia County to add to the
Okay.
Doris Leeper Preserve. Yeah, that, because of the way the grants and everything were done, that was rezoned to GPU as well. But it's obviously conservation land for the park with trails. So it's got other covenants and restrictions that really limit it.
I did have a person ask me, and I wanted to find out for them, and put it on the record that I did. When they do apply for a change, there still will be notices, neighbors will get letters, or signs will go up, people will know, they're just,
The only time signs go up or notices are issued are if a property is rezoned, if somebody's asking for something special, like a variance, special exception, things like that. If any other zoning category in the city of Port Orange, if you have a list of permitted uses, you are allowed to make application for a site plan to build on that property. There's no notices required if it's a list of permitted uses, unless you're asking for something special, to rezone, a variance, special exception, something special that's not allowed.
Can I ask you a question? The SunTrust Bank on Dunlawton, behind, you know where the McDonald's is?
Where they're trying to build the Arby's now?
Yeah, yeah. There was a sign that went up because of the change.
They did, because they
there.
were doing an MDA amendment. It was a zoning change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we already
So
saw
anytime
that.
there's a zoning change, a land use change, a request for something special that's not allowed by right in the code, that's when there's notices and signs put out and things like that.
So zoning change associated with a restaurant. as
Anytime
opposed
there's
to
any kind of zoning, land use related change, or you're asking for something special that's not allowed by right.
Yeah, that thing was weird anyway, because it was only zone bank only, that was it.
Yeah.
Never
So this
seen
is
it
just
before.
making it so we don't have a situation like last week where we have to have a public hearing even though it's
And you can't
already
vote
in
on
the,
it.
in the,
Yeah. Do it
land use
inside.
anyway. So do we get to decide what we want in that land use? Just kidding.
There might be changes that come out of other things, so
We'll probably see it in the year, right?
any kind of code amendments. we see.
Yeah.
any questions from any of the other board members? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve case number 18-25000007 as is.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Public comment?
Are there
Oh, I
any?
thought he did.
Sorry, thank you. Are there any public comments?
James Green,
Yes.
Don Junko.
Yes.
Maria Mills Burnett.
Yes.
Bo Bothamy.
Yes.
Mike Arminio.
Yes.
Thomas Jordan.
Yes.
Nick White.
Yes.
Good luck with that, guys. Do us proud.
Commissioner comments? Mr. Green?
All right. Tim, come on up.
Chomping at the bit.
Oh, poor Tim.
I learned how to use the
We really
notepad
should
on my
start
iPad.
buying him beer
That's
after
not
these
good.
meetings.
Look at you. 2 screens.
All right, so here's where,
Can you hit delete?
do I get 3 minutes?
Yes.
Here's where I get a
That's
little
it.
confused, okay, when we talk about land development and code, and even more specifically, this little issue that just happened. We talk about permitted uses on a property, okay, and we said that the Lowe's can be retail and this and this and this, and that's why we have what we have at the Lowe's. But the church is permitted use on the property to be a church, but yet we're allowing another use on the same property.
Simultaneous.
And I'm confused by that multiple uses on one property. The church is the permitted use on the property. How are we allowing another use on this same property?
When it's already built.
Well, as long as basically that's the permitted, it's listed as a permitted use for that zoning district, that property can have multiple permitted uses as long as it meets all the dimensional requirements, landscaping, parking. For instance, we have a lot of churches that also have daycare facilities, private schools on them. Those basically have, you know, those are all individual uses because.
But they're within the confines of the permitted use. Okay.
No, basically, if you look at the GPU zoning district, it lists private school as a permitted use, house of worship as a permitted use, daycare facility as a permitted use, and then monopole as a permitted use. Then, so
that got in there.
But
that's something that they put in 1997. But basically, yeah. So those, I mean, other cases too, where you have, you know, you have a single parcel with, you know, bank and a restaurant together at the same time. Those are basically.
But they're in a district. They're in a zone that says we're going to have, and that's in that permitted use. I get it, but the church is the permitted use on the property was the church, and we, you know, you've done the site plan and the parking and handicap and all that for the church, and now we're adding in this.
As long as you can add those additional uses, as long as you have the requirements. You know, basically you're adding, let's say you have a church and you want to add in a daycare facility. Basically, we're going to make sure that you have the right number of parking, the landscaping, the screening. That parking may trigger more stormwater. If you can't do those improvements, then that additional use would not be allowed. Same thing with the cell tower. Right now, we have not had that site plan in here yet.
So does stormwater come into it?
What's that?
Stormwater's got to come into
Correct.
it, yes?
But we have not had a site plan to look at. We've had a little picture showing dot, here's where it's going. Once we get the official site plan, we're going to review it for our
I guess
code.
I'm just really on the fence about how we can have two separate, I mean, very extreme, different uses on one property.
Whereas a church and a daycare center run by the church is
Again,
similar,
absolutely.
but two separate.
Well, because it's already built. If it wasn't already built and somebody came in and said, I want to build a cell tower, I think it would be different. But you already have one use built.
But that
now
is
you
the
wanna
use
build
of the
an
property.
opposite. Right. Now you want to build a different use on top of that.
As long as our code's the way our code's structured, as long as you can meet all dimensional requirements and requirements in the code, as long as it's permitted use, you can add a separate use onto that property. Which is what they're proposing to do.
If you remember,
I mean, we have zoning districts that are, you know, require mixed uses, multiple uses on one confined property. So that's the way our code is structured.
Yeah, if you remember about 8-10 years ago, there was the church on Old Kings, and they wanted to add a daycare. So we had to go through and look and make sure they had ample parking. It never ended up getting done, but the guy had a house. He wanted to turn it into a church, and then he wanted to add that.
Oh, that.
So, and he wanted to add parking, and he didn't have sufficient
It
parking.
just seems to me like these two uses on this property, they just don't mesh when we're talking about a permitted use of a church, and then we're going to allow a different permitted use.
I think like we're doing, we're putting that time out for that moratorium to look at that, and we will, consider that in this case.
All right, then I'll let that one die for now.
I think to add to what you're saying is permitted uses within a confines of a building, bank, restaurant, building. But when you have something that's not in the norm of a building and it is a tall tower that now becomes a very large eyesore, and then this education that we're getting about the fall zones and radiations and diesel exhaust, this is putting the cell tower in a different category altogether. So I'm hoping that when they do this 3-month moratorium, that they're going to isolate the cell tower into something that's unique in a zone.
I don't think we need to talk about. We're not going to talk about the cell tower. I'm just talking about land uses as a whole. I don't want to get into that because we still got that whole thing going on. So I just again, as from a development side, when I look at the city, and I look at that church and I see where it sits, and then to have this different type of use, which is far extreme than what was approved, which was a church, it just seems like it's two different uses on one property. I get restaurant, bank, whatever, but not this. Okay, so I'll let that one go. All right, so I've been up and out early in the mornings. I can't help but notice there's more and more trucks lining up on Williamson in the median to go into food services on
U.S. Foods.
U.S. Foods. It is a hazard. I mean, you get past that little island and boom, there is a truck in the dark in the median. They are parking up and down the road now in front of that U.S. Foods, and something's got to be done.
PD.
Yeah.
Okay?
Is it because they can't get in there?
There's so many of them.
Are
It's
they
a big
s-
place.
Just so many of them, they're all trying to get there at the same time kind of
Right.
thing.
So are they,
'Cause I've
are they
noticed that
stacking
too.
or are they parked?
They are parked in the medium,
They're parked in the median.
Okay.
and they are dark, and it is dark there,
So they're not stacking waiting to turn. They're
Negative.
literally just parked in a
parked
median.
it with
Yeah,
the
that's
lights
a
off.
nice
And that's
With
what
lights
got
off,
me.
yeah.
The lights were off when I was
Yeah.
right at the very
I
end of that
assumed they
concrete.
were sleeping.
And again, it's a hazard.
We'll pass it along.
And we talked about that, okay. The church property on Williamson, I
That
saw
was
the
my
article in the
question.
paper. Any more progression on that at Williamson and Madeline?
The engineers, I believe, next week then, as we're wrapping up, trying to get that wrapped up on there so they can submit that site plan.
So they're within their time limit?
They'll be within their time limit.
Were they demoing it? Cause I heard
No,
talk
their
about.
their proposal is to refurbish it, basically gonna be a shell building essentially, but the exterior will be refinished and the front area will be landscaped, parking necessary, and it'll be there as basically a multi-tenant building waiting for tenants.
All right.
Quick question on
With
that,
a
I'm
tower on
sorry.
it,
It's still my turn.
Yeah.
But I'm adding to
Okay.
it, because I was gonna be one of my
Okay.
questions, so,
Don't make me use this.
Subparagraph B on, Lance's topic is, years ago, many years ago, that building was built without inspections in certain phases.
We've
And-
already addressed that. We have a structural engineer who's basically doing the proper work that's necessary to certify that building, and that will be submitted with the building permit.
Okay, cool, okay,
That was my big thing too, is how you're gonna bring it to today's code.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, the Wawa at Nova Road, Dunlawton and Nova Road, since it has been built, has had a torn up driveway, the first driveway off of past Nova Road since it's existed. Who's fixing it?
Where?
The driveway that goes into the Wawa and the Walgreens,
It's
or
like-
see,
that's
whatever it
a
is.
That'll be a code action. We've had code
Yeah.
enforcement work with them before. They've patched it, so that'll be an action with path on the code.
Since the Wawa has been open, that pothole has existed, and it still exists today, and it's an eyesore to the city. Okay, and then one more thing, and I know you don't want to hear this one.
Waffle House
But on my
sign.
way here today, I happened to look at the decorative lights that are along Williamson, at Dunlawton, Taylor Road, all the little decorative pink lights that we had all these developers put up. The Walgreens and every one of them are broke, not one of them work, and there's wires just hanging out of them.
I think somebody almost took the dome.
Why are we,
Who's supposed
we
to
need not
maintain those?
continue our developers to put in these deco lights because they don't work. But what are we doing about these? I mean, they are literally got wires hanging out of them.
I know we've been working with Public Works on getting those corrected. Also, we are currently in a phase now. We've got what you're going to be seeing is on the opposite side of Dunlawton there.
Right.
But basically, the area from US 1 to Spruce Creek, we should be going to construction here shortly on a project where we're removing all those white walk lights and replacing those with actually street lights. Then.
Okay.
It needs.
Yeah, I just want to just to add to that. I think because we've worked with them a little bit in legal, and the long-term goal is to probably for the city to take those back over. It's just such a mixed bag of
It was.
who's got what in terms of maintenance that I think
Absolutely.
the city's going to try to get those back on.
But
think
we
the
made
idea
those
too is-
developers put them in.
Yeah.
I think the idea too is if this one turns out good on here, is to jump and do that area, the possibility of doing the street lights in there,
Yep.
and get rid of those pink ones that are faded and look not.
I mean, we
And
actually, we
half of them
have
don't work.
safety hazards. I mean, it is really, really dark there now. And we have open wires hanging out of lights, and it doesn't look good.
I'll get with Public Works tomorrow there, so we can see like the ones that have the open wires, see what we can do about those then. Like I said, the next phase might be to look at basically doing, replacing those from the walk lights with actual street lights then.
Yeah, I know the council has talked about that. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
I'll jump on that same one. If you add Meeker Place to that list, they added custom lights there, and they're all gone. They've fallen down. They finally hauled them away and haven't put any back up there. That's all I had. I just piggyback. Thanks.
Big question. The Wawa and BJ's entrance off of Yorktown Extension, or the Yorktown that goes around all the way to Hensel Road. If you're coming from Hensel heading to Dunlawton, that nice little curvy, all that stuff. People coming out of that one entrance where you have a left turning lane going into the gas station, but also you have people merging into the other left turning lane heading on to Dunlawton. Is there any? I mean, I can't understand how the hell we allowed an entrance. Is that county or is that us?
I don't think Hensel goes.
If you're going from Hensel, if you're turning left on, if you're coming from Hensel down to Yorktown Extension, going around BJ's, the gas station, coming up to Dunlawton, where the Wawa's is, and you have an entrance going into the BJ's and coming out of Wawa's. Well, there's a left turning lane to go in, left turning lane going into Wawa's and BJ's and all that stuff. But then you also have the backup traffic that's turning left onto Dunlawton, heading west. And that entrance I'm surprised nobody's got killed, because it is a dangerous thing.
Especially after school.
Yeah, and traffic is backed up. I mean, who allowed that entrance to be put there? Because, in my opinion,
he's saying Hensel, but Hensel's pretty far down.
No, I'm saying coming
turning
from
right
Hensel.
on Yorktown.
Yeah, because that's the way I come. I go when I'm heading out to Summer Trees. I'll go up Taylor, take a right on Hensel, or at the light at Hensel in Yorktown, and you come all the way around to the
Yorktown Extension.
Yorktown Extension. You take a left onto the Yorktown Extension. Well, you have that exit and entrance right there.
You're talking about the exit that goes to the chicken place and then.
What's the
I'm talking backside of the wall.
Wawa, basically, right
Yeah,
by the
basically
intersection
right
of
there.
Yorktown and Dunlawton.
It's right there by the left turning lane heading west onto Taylor.
And people sit in the middle, blocking the other way.
People are flying around that corner. I'm surprised nobody's got killed there yet. And
where people want to make a left-hand turn to get back out to
Yeah,
Dunlawton.
yeah.
They shouldn't be. That should not have a left-hand out.
Yeah, it should be a right in and right out. I mean,
most of the time, like you said, basically it occurs during school traffic hours. There, you've got a large number of traffic.
It's all the time.
Right.
I'll be there 4, 5, 6, 8 o'clock.
We're looking at expanding that turn lane to get more cars in there stacking. Then, I mean, and the other thing too is
you can't extend the left turning lane onto Taylor, because it's in front of that. It'll be in front of that entrance.
That left-hand turning lane does need to be extended, though. If you extended that turning lane, because it is really short,
You're talking about
and then you get everybody that stacks in the right-hand turning, left turning lane, and the left is empty.
Yeah.
So it backs the traffic up.
Then you got people coming out of that Wawa's, in the back of that Wawa's, trying to turn left onto Yorktown to get to Taylor or Dunlawton, and they're backed up going into the parking lot.
It would help to make that a right turn only out of there.
It should be right in, right out. I mean, is that our decision or is that the county's?
That'd basically be a city road then.
Okay. I mean, that's something to look at. I mean, it's really dangerous, but also it's just very frustrating, because people are just trying. You're blocking both ways of traffic. Because people are trying to get out there and they're blocking, the southbound traffic on Yorktown.
The other day after school, there was a semi-truck blocking the whole shebang.
I mean, the other thing too, you run into, you get in there, you get 3 or 4 semis or cars towing trailers, it's going to block it up there.
This is just general traffic.
And there are multiple other points of access and egress out of that one. I mean, I go out to the back area by basically BJ's and make that turn, and you get out of it.
Well, I do that, but a lot of people don't, because they're coming in there from out of town or getting gas or
Is
whatever.
it possible to make it a right in, right out?
I mean, in terms of basically, working with, property owners there, I'm sure they'll fight that then, and on that side then.
Well, I mean, it's a matter of safety, and it's not really just, like I said, you got people who will pull out into.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the point where basically they're pulling out, sitting there blocking traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, they've kind of made that decision to make that not a great movement there.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
we could make everybody drive right, then we'd be doing everything right. But I'm just saying.
I don't think I don't have the time. I would never be able to correct that then in terms of driving around. I mean, we can look at it. I mean, the other thing talked about was basically trying to make sure that there's directional signage basically in that shopping center to get people to use the other access points there.
Yeah. But and the question is whether they will. I mean,
I don't know how many times you see basically come out there, make the left, and they get in the right-hand turn lane and go right onto Dunlawton, where you could basically go through there, just the subdivision, go between Polo Traffic Aisle, make the right, go down Dunlawton that way. Instead of basically, but they just seem to go to the first access point.
We'll turn it into the pavilion.
Well, I think too, you get a lot of people through that area that don't live here. They're getting off the interstate to hit Wawa or to hit Starbucks or to hit whatever. So they don't really know there's other access points unless you point them in that direction.
Well, plus the fact some people are going all the way across to turn right. To head east on Dunlawton.
Right, when you can go down the street.
That's even worse. So I mean, just look at it. I mean, it's just something that's frustrating. I mean, it's been, it's like I said, it can be any time of the day. It doesn't matter. It's not a school time.
Same with the 9,000 U-turns in front of Lowe's.
Yeah.
It goes on.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, but there's cops there now. They're just having a good time. They're filling up their ticket pads.
FDOT.
They just do this now. They're sitting in the corner. They just go. I saw you.
I had
come on
two
over.
turn in front of you. Turn in front of me yesterday.
Yeah, DOT did
It's
that
an
for
easy
us.
way to get tickets, and I'm sure the police department is enjoying it.
That'll train the
Well,
locals,
I
but it
mean,
won't train
Chief
the
Monahan
tourists.
was,
Train the
Chief
tourists.
Monahan was not for any of that stuff, man. I mean,
Well,
he,
well, they
especially
did.
at Keller
They
Ranch.
did extend the U-turn. If you want to drive an extra 50 feet, you can get into a
But
U-turn
people
lane.
who aren't from here don't realize that U-turn is
They're
there.
the ones that get the tickets.
And they're the ones that, yeah. Well, they're not getting enough tickets,
Hey.
but.
I'm good, Tim. That's it.
Okay. Bo.
Good.
Maria.
So that U-turn in front of Target. No, I'm just kidding.
Wawa song.
I'm just kidding. I'm good.
Well, the only thing is that last month, well, I was really proud of my fellow commissioners because we weren't voting on anything, but we correctly assessed the tone and what was best for the city and the residents, and we were put up here to hopefully make sure the best interest of the city was kept, and that's why our city council picked us. And on Tuesday, all our views were in agreement with our city council. And I just want to throw out a congratulations that it's an honor working with all you guys, because I think we're doing a great job, and I just wanted to, you know, not many people say that, but I'm going to say, you guys, it's an honor to work with you guys.
I agree.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second that.
I guess I can't ask Mr. Berman any questions. No.
Now he owes you 2 beers.
I was driving in Daytona Beach Shores, and
They don't have nothing to do with shore.
yeah. Well, no, I mean,
Wrong
they
city,
have
buddy.
they have a Waffle House there, and I noticed that their sign was just kidding.
You know, I don't think
That's
you
a
have
sore
any
subject,
sense of
okay?
humor after 7 o'clock.
Sorry,
No,
Tim.
he's done.
That's a sore
Okay,
subject.
That's all we'll
public
have left.
comments.
Make
We're
motion
good.
to
Make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Move to
Second.
adjourn. Second. Somebody second?
Yes.
Second.
All in
Third.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting
Aye.
adjourned. Good night.